There we go. Welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday, I think it is. And thanks for joining us for our talk about assessments and why assessments are actually at the base of most incidents, um, deaths, um, sometimes complaints.
Billy.
But have the biggest, basically have the biggest impact on participant safeguarding and actually service success. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and so we'll sort of kick off. Alrighty. Now, I should just ask: is there anyone here I haven't met yet? If you want to put your hand up, there's a few names I think I don't recognize. Okay, a few hands going up. Lovely to have you, and welcome back to everybody who I've seen on a regular basis or semi-regular basis. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Gina Ingrell. I run an organization called Effective Policy, um, and uh, and offsprings of that organization are also Learn Easy, which is a learning management system and platform, and a smart compliance system, which is an NDIS software. So my background is was as an allied health professional. I graduated in 1987. I did that for about 15 years, and then I moved into the community services sector about 28 years ago. It is now, and I worked across a lot of services like homelessness and drug and alcohol and mental health, um, inpatient units, and psychiatric hospitals, and I've worked in the policy area of government as well as for the last 25 years. I've been really interested in worked or contracted as a quality standards assessor in the health and human services area. And I guess that's my passion, but it doesn't mean that service delivery isn't still very close to my heart because it's so linked with quality. The only reason I went into quality was I was a service manager. So yeah, lovely to have you. So today let's dive into assessments and what they can do for you, your business, your safeguarding, and what a poor assessment will actually, what a poor assessment and the impact a poor assessment can have on both of those things as well. I will share screen, and you'll have to forgive me. I've just moved to a Mac today, and it's a long time since I've used a Mac, so I am relearning a whole lot of things. Uh, you will see. But let's just touch very briefly. This one doesn't come under, I'm going to look at the something called an intake form or an eligibility form is another way to sort of talk about that. Um, it doesn't have a big, it doesn't have, to my mind, it doesn't really have a large impact on safeguarding, but it's certainly an incredibly good way to triage who's right for your service and who's not right for your service, and how you can, firstly, not waste too much of your own time and not waste the time of your clients and the family members of those clients who are looking for service for them. Um, I don't know, for those of you who have been around for a long time, you might remember that we went through, there's a lot of phases that in government run services. And I do remember, in 2009, 2010, one of the biggest issues that we were dealing with in statewide disability services was people having to do so many assessments so many times. And it really started to come to the forefront that this was quite traumatic for people, and it was trauma informed uh, um, processes were starting to come to the forefront around then. We were wondering why all of our, if everyone was wondering why their clients, it's for health services, well, patients, families of those people were fed up and having breakdowns and yelling and screaming and getting angry on phones or etc. It's because they were sick to death of answering the same thing over and over again by so many people. And so began, some of the trauma-informed processes. And the fact that if we could just not ask them the same thing over and over again, we would contribute, firstly, to our own effectiveness, and secondly, to not triggering people who have brought up sometimes, three moderate to profound autistic children, and they are asked over and over again to fill out the same damned information again and again and again and again. And that's why we started streamlining. Well, what can we do about having an intake process that doesn't ask them for 5 pages of information and then tell them, oh, we're not the right service for you, or that's something we can't deal with. We find out that stuff up front, okay? And that's what an intake or eligibility form or process or questionnaire or whatever you want to do with it, whether it's the one that sits front and central on your website, or it's a dynamic form, or it's a conversation you have. Make it clear that you need to ask just the right information to know whether you can help that person or they're right for your service. Yeah. Before you start asking pages and pages and pages of information. And I can tell you right now, when I started doing some assistance for my nephew, when he had no support coordinator about 5 years ago, I experienced that front and center because I was filling out the forms for my brother. Because when you've brought up a child and you've gone through all of those processes, often those families have broken apart down the other end, or they're just so damned exhausted that, you know, sometimes a family member can't even do one more form, not one more form. So I did them for him, and what I found was a whole lot of very prominent organisations were asking me, as the carer nominee, plan nominee, to fill out these forms, which I did. And after the first three, where they said, "Oh, we don't have any availability," and I thought, how dare you ask me to fill out 8 pages and then tell me that you don't have any availability, or it's not the right fit, or we can't take on any more at the moment. What kind of people do that? There's certainly people that don't think. They don't think clearly, they don't think smartly, and they actually have no knowledge of trauma-informed practice or triaging to just find out the most minimal information. So please make sure upfront that your information, if you want less people getting angry at you down the other end, um, and you want to stress out carers and parents and guardians, and maybe not even miss some of the clients that might have come to you if you didn't present them with a really long form, please just find out exactly what you need to know whether they are suitable for you and you for them in the first instance, because it's cruel to do otherwise. And once you have ascertained that they are a possible match for your service and you would like to take them on, then we would go to our assessment. So intake and assessment should be two different things. Intake is literally a triaging of whether we are the right organisation for you and we can help you. So this is a model comprehensive assessment, and it's been developed over a number of years with me running this organisation, and it's really, really good. Um, and, it's been through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of audits, with some auditors who have no idea what they're talking about and others who have contributed fantastic suggestions or etc. to the morphing and growth of this. And it has been informed by things that have happened, and changes that have happened, and dangers that arise in this sector, and just trying to keep participants as safe as possible. You'll have it's usually providers that really don't know what they're doing, or staff that don't know what they're doing and have no real experience or qualifications in the industry. Oh, do we have to ask that many questions? Well, yeah, you do. Because when you're doing a supported independent living, you have got care of that person 24/7. Yeah, you do have to ask these questions. Now, the other thing that you need to understand is proportionality. There are some clients who are complex and they're going to be taken care of 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then there are others who may just want cleaning. Okay. Unfortunately, unless you're running a verification level service, which is just fourth standards, where you can get away with a very lenient assessment, very lenient. Um, if you are doing cleaning and you are certification registered, which means you also have a core module, the fact that you're doing cleaning and your certification puts you into the bucket where you have to do a higher level, more intense assessment of that person, even if you're just doing cleaning. However, as auditors, it is easy, a good auditor will understand proportionality themselves, which is there are lots of things that we won't need to go into when you are just doing cleaning for a client, even if you're certification registered. However, you know, that doesn't happen all that often. You've got usually people who are having cleaning and something else, or else they're just having cleaning and they may be just verification registered. So please remember, there's complexity. There's the hardest, most at risk people, and then the people who are the least at risk. You need to be able to have some reasoning that you've learned, figured out in your head. It's a bit of logic. I wouldn't really say it's common sense because I don't think it's common sense. I think it is a learned skill. And there are people who have a really good, clear sense of logic and they're able to work through those things better. But at times it really does take learning, knowing, just understanding the difference between complex, what can go wrong, and not complex, where you wouldn't need to go into such great details. That said, there isn't anything in this assessment that doesn't need to be asked. I'm not saying that every person is going to have an answer for each one of these questions, but I am saying certification level assessment for that asked. Okay. Answer this. Leave it, right? You are begging for a non-conformity, and that's what you'll get if you're a decent, because you don't.
Gina, sorry to interrupt, but your sound you're cutting in and out.
Hit it.
There,
You sure? Is it me or
there.
is it you? Has everybody else said that too?
Yes, it's all good now. It's probably your microphone. It
Oh no.
was away
How's
a
this,
bit.
everyone? Is this completely different to what you were hearing? Is this good? Testing, one, two, three.
Yeah, that's better.
That's
Good.
better.
And I hope you were hearing me before that.
No, cut out.
Beg your pardon?
It was actually cut out, Gina, so we weren't able to hear you properly.
Okay, so Sheila, so no, okay, all right. So,
It was cut out for probably 3 minutes.
okay, tell me, have you heard me since the time I started talking about the comprehensive assessment here?
Yeah, the last thing we kind of heard, Gina, was around when you said, you know, everything in this assessment should be asked. You're not saying that it might apply to everyone, but the question should be asked. That's the
Okay,
last thing
all
I
right. So
heard.
what I said previous to that was that there is what all social science, disability, aged care, what anyone who's working in this area, if you're working hands-on with people, needs to learn. It's probably the least available skill at this point, given the market that we work in, is reasoning. You need to be able to work out or learn and work out and grow with the concepts of proportionality and reasoning your way through things. So where I have people that we meet who will say, "Oh my God, I don't want to answer all that." Well, they don't really know where they are. They don't really know what they're doing and they don't really know the importance of it. Yes, you won't have to answer all of these for every single person, but you do have to ask them. If you're a certification level um, provider, you will have to ask them. And the answer can be not applicable. But when you don't write not applicable and you just don't answer it, you are going to get a non-conformity. It's that simple. There has to be an answer, whatever that is going to be, not applicable or the actual answer. So, 1 in 10 patients uh, in the world uh, who experience negative impacts through the service that they are obtaining, and I think the 1 in 10 is for people who have died unnecessarily, and the root cause has shown that an assessment was not thorough enough. It's the assessment, what you find out about that person, that is going to be able to set you up to be able to manage their risk, also know their needs and their preferences, and so not only deliver a safe service, but also to be able to deliver the service that is person-centered, and that is going to be something that they're going to like and not want to get as far away from your organization as possible because they didn't get their needs met. So it's a win-win in each of those categories. So it's a win for safety. It's a win for having a good service, and having a good service means you're probably going to keep that person longer and that you're going to probably get more referrals. So it's a win-win. Okay. Um, so yeah, 1 in 10 root cause for avoidable death has been an inefficient or unacceptable assessment. So if I were to say the amounts of people during audit that we find who have sometimes not answered the question, sometimes answered the question in a way that's illegible or unreadable, and sometimes people will discard a comprehensive assessment and go and find one that they think suits them better, which might be like 2 pages. And once again, you're simply just going to get major non-conformities for not only that, but it snowballs into other areas because this assessment is the this is the tool that flags where there might be other risks. It's not the risk assessment, but it flags all the other things that you might have to do after this. So it speaks to so many of the standards. They're numerous in number. It speaks to the rights and responsibilities. It speaks to person-centeredness. If you're going to deliver a person-centered service, what do you think is the one thing you're going to have to do to be able to do that? Can anyone tell me?
Include the participant and their family.
Absolutely. But even before that, but yes, definitely. That's a big one. If it's going to be person-centered, what do you have to do to make that person-centered? At assessment.
We have Sarah, consent.
Oh, well, it's not the answer I'm looking for, but it'll never be wrong. What if you're going to make something, if I'm going to make, I'm just looking at a name there. If I'm going to make Lyndall a person-centered support plan or care plan, um, what is, what am I going to have to do to be able to be in a position to even do that?
Meet the person.
Yep, you're going to have to ask questions. So when people look at an assessment and go, well, that's a lot to ask, yeah, but uh, there's nothing in there that shouldn't be there. And if you're going to do person-centered, there's one thing you need to be curious. You need to ask questions. You can't do anything person-centered if you haven't asked the question in the first place. So you need to ask the question. You need to, as the other person said, collaborate with that person all the way along. But this is more just about restricting it to the assessment. I need to ask the question. So if you want to keep someone safe by knowing what all their risks are, what do you have to do? It is a trick question. So we've
Awesome.
said to be person-centered, we need to ask questions. If you want to keep someone safe by finding out what all their risks are, what do you have to do?
Assess the risks and implement.
Ask questions. Yeah, you got to ask the questions up front. So the reason we have a more comprehensive assessment is so that we can't miss anything. Would I have had to do this prior to the NDIS? No, we didn't. And I'll tell you why. Because in those days, under the old service funding models, um, there were so many more qualified people doing these roles. Um, Intake officers used to have their best and brightest. It is not unusual to find a person doing intake who is the owner of the organization who might have owned their own mechanic or mechanic shop or milk bar, or maybe they were an IT specialist. We're lucky if we get nurses, we're lucky if we get social workers. I'm still not saying that they're all brilliant. They've still got learning to do, many of them. But what I'm trying to say is that about 75 to 80% of this provider market is an unskilled workforce. So the reason this is bigger than it might have been prior to the rollout of the NDIS is that we don't have a skilled workforce doing this work a lot of the time. It's getting better, I think, but then the more providers that come in the market tends to water that down a bit more. Just when we think, oh, wow, the skill's really growing, people have been around for X amount of years, and we've got this continual influx of more people. It kind of waters it down again. But yeah, it's there because people don't know what to ask, so we've written down what you need to ask. So in essence, let's walk through it then. I'm not going to sort of, it's not, this is about why does doing an assessment make it a safe service? And why does, remember the purpose of this, and why does an assessment make you a better provider and more popular? Because the more you know, the more you can deliver that person-centered service. The more you've asked, the more you're going to be able to know upfront what were the risks that person has, and you're going to be able to move yourself on at a later date, which is risk assessment. You're going to be able to move yourself on and go, yeah, this has triggered this, and this. I know I've got to go and do a bit of an assessment and plan on certain things. So let's walk through. Um, uh, Remember, I'm on a Mac. A Mac. Is everyone seeing this quite clearly? I'm frightened to move any button in case. I'll try and expand it up to full page because I'm just not used to Macs. Okay, let's do it. Okay, we're on full page. Should be nice and big for you. Is that big enough for everyone, or do you need it a little bit bigger? It's all good? Okay, lovely. First, foremostly, really, it is just the questions. And I mean, these aren't anything exciting. Date, assessment, one of the things that we put up front here because it makes a really big difference, and we learned this over the last 6 years of audits, right? Um, we've learned that it's just better for us to ask, is it a silk line or not? Because, you know, there that's going to change the sort of trajectory of their care. It's going to be higher needs. So we ask that up front, and then you know yourself, okay, but I've got a still client. I'm going to have to do a chap. Does everyone know what a chap is now? After how many years it's been since it came out? If you're not a SIL provider, you might not know, and that's understandable. Does everyone know what a chap is? It's a comprehensive health assessment plan. They were actually in use before the NDIS, and oopsie, they forgot to bring them along on the NDIS journey. So we had an enormous amount of people in SIL um, homes across Australia who didn't have anything that resembled a comprehensive health assessment plan, and that contributed to the higher rates of preventable death, the lower rates of quality of life for all of those people in supported independent living. The mistakes that have been made by successive governments in the rollout of the NDIS have been instrumental in the the poor service delivery at times and the preventable deaths and, why we had a Royal Commission and etc. They just forgot a few things. They didn't think it through at all. So yeah, the CHAP is a really important document, and anyone who worked in any of the state-funded services, I usually find when I audit them or I meet them, they're usually never stopped using it from the day they transferred into their own, being their own provider from being a employee of aging, disability and home care or what it would be in your other state. So some people, they were already doing it. But yeah, you need to do one. The reason that, does anyone, I can't take the teacher out of me, unfortunately. I like training and teaching. Does anyone want to tell me why we would want a CHAP, a comprehensive health assessment plan, which goes to their GP to complete most of the things, not everything? Um, why would we want one for a SIL client? I
Anyone?
I know some of you know. Don't be shy.
From Carol, so we know what care needs to be given.
Absolutely, because in some situations, in fact, in the majority of them, to be honest, there is no family. Even if there's family, the family are exhausted or they're old or they've got their own mental illnesses and issues. If someone's in 24/7 care, someone's got to be taking care of their dental, their GPs, their health in general. Someone has to be directing and facilitating that, and it's the SIL house that does it, the SIL provider. So yeah, without those, health really declines even further. Um, and it only they only they only suggested that people use it about the time COVID came out. So that's 2020, and the NDIS had been going since what, 2013. So you can see
Right.
once again, successive governments have made big mistakes. Um, so coming back to here, most importantly, you want to know straight up, is that person coming from hospital? Yeah, are they coming from hospital? If so, you need to know, you need a discharge plan. You need to know what what was going on, what they knew about that person. Um, and that's not just for SIL. It is good to know that someone has just come out of a hospital stay and what that means for your care with them. Now, if you're just cleaning, this is where proportionality comes in. Am I going to ask as much depth questions for someone I'm only going to be doing cleaning for, as opposed to someone I'm going to have in my SIL home or somebody I'm going to be doing 5 days a week personal care for? All of those service types, you've got to put your reasoning hat on and you've got to go, the services I'm going to be delivering, is it relevant? Do I need more information? Of course, you want to know if you're doing personal care. Of course, you need to know if you're doing SIL. If you're only taking them out on outings, that's a lighter touch, but it's still important because there's still food involved. There's still risk involved. So you need to be thinking those things through. Um, your participant details, I think you would all have those. Something that's become newer is finding out a bit about the public guardian. People have found that they need to know, they would like to know what parts of this person's life does the public guardian have management over? Because it's not always the same. And if it's not written down somewhere, some of the feedback that we had or requests we've had from a provider was if we ask that up front, it's going to make it easier for us down the other end because we know they've either got financial management or they've got their life, their your home and living management. So knowing that up front has proved to be really helpful. Of course, the nominee and carer. Client matching matters whether it's a SIL or whether it's going to be simply who is going to be a good fit for that person. But we also, you may think this, you know, we all kind of know, oh, I think I've got a really good match for that person. It's okay that you think that, but you have to write it down because you can't meet the standard on that unless you show how you thought that through. So here's your evidence that you have done your due diligence, you have done what you are supposed to do as a provider, and you have asked those questions. Now, this isn't the client matching tool that we would suggest a SIL provider does. We've built another tool which takes into account, all the previous years that I worked in that area, and I update it as we learn new things in this sector called the NDIS. But that is a much more in-depth tool. But this is really, it's a light touch client matching, and you've done your due diligence. GP details. We're seeing a lot more nurse practitioner in interactions now. So we've put in a new thing for that because people are seeing nurse practitioners. They are seeing them for colds and flus and they're turning up in all sorts of GP or health centres as well. Communication needs. There's a really good reason that's there, and it's a really good reason that it's up front because communication needs, well, it could be cultural and language, but it also might be that they have swallowing or talking issues. It could be that people with communication can't really, make their own decisions either because it speaks to a bigger problem. And also communication comes into the whole notion of when someone's not able to speak to you about something being wrong with them. I mean, there was a death not so long ago of a person who had a bowel obstruction and they died from it in a SIL home. They were in pain and there was absolutely nothing found on that assessment form. How do I know when you're in pain? I ask this carer, how do I know when they're in pain? Also, learning when people's behavior changes. What is one of the first questions that you ask? You try to find out if they're in pain. So that's from a behavior support and also from a medical, how is that person going to tell me they're in pain? We need to meet the other need here, which is, who's going to be involved in that plan and how are you going to demonstrate that? So this is yet a demonstration for that. Now, there's a lot of auditors that don't audit very well. And, I'd like to think that one day that will change, that they all do their job properly. At the moment, there's some good ones, average ones, and some people that shouldn't be there. And you don't know who at times is going to audit you. I can think of half a dozen that I know would not pick up anything in anyone's plan. They're so lazy. But eventually you're going to get auditors, if I have my way, that they're all auditing or assessing properly, Like I hope we're moving towards that. And so having these things at some point will become a necessity, not just oh, I won't need it because my auditor never asks for that. The health and medical is actually paramount, absolutely paramount in the safety of your person. Absolutely paramount. There isn't anything there that shouldn't be there. We're talking about all the things on the left are mostly related to, well, left and right. Yeah, on the left are mostly related to the practice alerts. Now, those practice alerts, each and every one of them have come out because there have been far too many deaths in those areas or due to those causes, or far too many incidents where people have been hurt. So, as much as I don't have very much respect for the NDIS Commission or the NDIA, I know that they're not sitting there thinking, I've got nothing better to do, I'll write a practice alert. Um, Sadly, they are because of things that have happened to too many people uh, or, so they're not there for the fun of it. They're incredibly important. Also asking from a person-centered point of view, what do I want assistance with and what don't I want assistance with is another evidential thing from within the standards. And I'm not just putting it there so that people can show evidence. It is because of that as well. I'm putting it there because I know people don't know how to interpret the standards. So I've interpreted them for everyone. And I will say that people that do the use our forms, liaise with us, they do incredibly well. I can't speak to the people who don't come back and work with us. I can only speak to the people who I know are either pretty smart and switched on and they go away and they follow the forms, um, or the ones that, continue to liaise with us and stay with us. Um, so health and medical, there's a little bit more. This is around the medication stuff. This is around finding out the level to which somebody can participate in their own medication or not participate in their own medication management. There is also another form, which when you just don't know, if you don't know whether somebody can manage their own medication, there is an assessment that we have which assesses the person's um, capacity. If they're saying they can, but you think, oh, I'm not sure, this isn't looking right. If you want to be sure, then you assess a person's capacity to do their medication. Um, and that's still more around medication. Mealtime management, of course, that came in 2020. Oh, sorry, 2021, November 2021. Um, Another thing that they kind of left off the practice standards, which I just don't understand it. How you could leave off assessing swallowing difficulties. I don't, I don't understand it. But they did, and then corrected it, you know, 9 years later, uh, because people were um, not living a quality of life if you're continually choking and aspirating. Um, and I can't tell you how many people I would speak to, and they would say something about choking or, oh, they're a bit cough and spluttering. I said, well, do you know, I would never, do you know what that's from? No, I said, they're probably choking on their food. Have you done a swallowing? That was before these were in place because when I opened up the standards in 2018, there was nothing about swallowing or meal planning or anything at all like that. So a lot of people under successive governments have suffered, um, a lower quality of life for not being able to be safe when they're drinking and eating. Um, but that's on the improve. But like I say, we might get one batch of providers educated and then they're going to let through a whole bunch more and there's more work to be done, which yeah, so mealtime, it's an absolute. We always want to know about which allied health and health assessments a person has. It's a given. There would not be a time that I would take on a client and not want to see the allied health report. Um, just just goes without saying. Um, we want to know a little bit about the physical environment and if they are, for example, you might be doing care in home. You might be doing 3 times a week or 5 times a week. Care in the home. It might be personal care. It might be helping someone mobilize. It might be getting people out and about. It might be all three of those things. And um, the living alone assessment didn't come in until after Anne-Marie Smith. So that piece of that change to the legislation was because of what happened with Anne-Marie Smith in South Australia. So now we do have a question in there because if we don't ask it, um, I know that the first thing that, community nurses or nurses are taught is this person living alone? But not everyone's a nurse. Um, so we need to have those questions in there because not everybody carries all that information in their head or even knows it in the first place. Now, if the answer is yes, you can go and do another assessment when you're completed here. Um, Mobility and transport, very important. And a lot of these things really did feed into the Anne-Marie Smith or the Titanic of, the Titanic of care is really, it was everything that could have gone wrong for Anne-Marie Smith went wrong. She had mobility issues, she had swallowing issues, she had communication issues. She had, the same, um, she had an inexperienced provider uh, who had no idea what they were doing. Clearly, she had the same worker every day. She had no one that understood that having the same worker was a problem. So I call that the Titanic. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for that lady. So we ask about mobility and transport. We ask about a person's living skills, um, and any barriers there may be for them to strengthen those living skills. So we're not just routinely working towards just following directions from your team leader who said, you're going out today to XYZ and that's all you see that is. Whereas you're going out to XYZ because this person's goals are to, get out and improve their physical health or to get out and meet people and create relationships or communities for themselves. Um, Whatever it is, we need to be aware of why we're doing it and what the barriers are. The families and relationships really matter. I think if I've seen anything flourish, I've seen the reduction of contact between person receiving service and that person's family, extended family, or the informal supports in their community, because everybody's first go to is another paid service. Because it's harder, isn't it, looking around for an unpaid service, and it's harder or more work to say, well, you know, does such and such have any aunties and uncles and extended family? Because in the old system, there wasn't a lot of money to go around. And so we had to engage very strongly with informal supports. So asking those questions up front, you have to anyway. I mean, it's in the standards, but you can also do some pretty good work with that. I think also, that sexuality and intimacy, it does speak to one of the standards, but it's really important too. There's some really good work done around people with behaviors of concern around, around what's the word, inappropriately taking their clothes off in places, but also having a sexual need, people with um, Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and other types of physical impairments as well. But they all have sexual and intimacy needs. Um, Interest and leisure goes without saying. We would ask those questions. Cultural and spirituality, it goes without saying. We would ask those questions. And I can't go past that one without telling you. I will always we've gone so far in everyone else's culture matters. I was doing an audit one day, and the person I said, oh, well, the files I've audited of yours are here. I said, you haven't asked this person's culture. You've got nothing about this person's culture. And he said, well, they're just Australian. And I went, oh, they're just Australian. So they don't have a culture? And he went, well, I went, so you're an Arabic speaking person, you're a Muslim and you have a culture. And I said, and this person, because they're Aussie, like Aussie born, fifth generation, whatever it might be, they don't have a culture. And he just sort of stared blankly at me. I said, well, I tell you what, I've got a culture. I like to wear shorts and t-shirts and singlet tops and thongs. And if you put me in something else, I'd be really upset. And I have a culture. I like to listen to Cold Chisel. I like to listen to Australian bands. I like Pavlova. I like, I said, so do you still think that an Australian doesn't have an Australian like third and fourth generation Aussie doesn't have a culture. And he went, no, I understand now. I went, yeah, it's not just a culture for everybody else. It's a culture. Everyone has a culture. So please don't forget that everyone has a culture. Um, yeah, so here we go. Um, Money and property, of course. I mean, this speaks to the standards. This speaks to the standards. This speaks to the standards. We're wanting to give you the things you need to ask to make sure that everything those standards would require you to do, you've covered off. You've been curious. You've asked the questions. You can make the best person-centered plan by asking all the questions. And that's not even including all of the risk ones. Some of these we might have flagged, oh, I've got to do a risk assessment. That'll be my next step. So this is like seeking information, and the next phase would be your risk assessments. Reasonable adjustments. It's here too, so that, this assessment speaks to everything. There isn't a standard or an indicator in the standards that is missed in terms of what you would need to know about that client before they come into your service, except for the fact that, like I said, there are some where we flag there's a risk and the risk would be done later, the risk assessment later. Now, this is not in the standard. So reasonable adjustment, I hope everyone's would probably be very clear with that these days. It could be anything like, well, they're going to live in this house and there's no ramp. We can put a ramp in. It could be that they're allergic to perfume, and you have to make sure that support workers don't wear perfume. It could be that they have such allergies of other types. So these reasonable adjustments come in all different shapes and sizes. It could be something about a physical product, or it could be something that is cognitively geared. They may not be able to remember things, for example, and you may have to put notes on the fridge. Perhaps they've got an early onset dementia, or they've just simply, their memory from age or something like that has declined to the point where, you do have to go the extra mile to assist someone to be able to participate in life in general. I was at the NDIS commission before I went into consulting for myself, and I was sitting next to someone who had every day this perfume. It was like, and I've had chemical sensitivity since 2005, and I just thought I'm so sick of like saying anything to anyone, because every experience I'd had, people had just taken it personally, and I thought, I'm at I'm at the NDIS. Surely this will be okay. And I said to the director that next to me, he was a physiotherapist. I said, look, I don't want to say this. I said, but the thing is, like, I can't sit here for long if people are going to wear perfume. And and she said, well, that's just ridiculous. I said, look, it's in the Disability Act. And she said, no, it's not. And I went, it is. It's in the Disability Act. And it is. So Um, all sorts of things are in the Disability Act. So, end of life care, just a really good thing. Um,
Gina, sorry to interrupt your microphone.
End of life,
There.
not in the standards at all. You can't be made to do this. I think one day it might be a standard, but it's not now. But it's a really good thing to do. Really, really good thing to do. Because a lot of people are going to live their life and pass away in care. Especially in supported independent living and SDA homes. Um, Required training for staff. This is this in the standards? Yes, it is. It is just one way we're trying to make it easier for staff to be able to have thought about what this person will need from my staff. We also have a training assessment plan, but this is just another way to do that. And just while you're there and you're doing it, they've got epilepsy, people will need that. They've got diabetes, we better make sure they've got a swallowing difficulty, we better make sure they're trained. It is just trying to give people different ways of collecting that information so that they can use it more easily. Um, so that is your assessment. The next little bit before the support plan would start to be configured is around responding to medical emergencies. And is this in the standards? Absolutely it is. So what it does is talk about what is the known medical issue, medical or psychiatric issue, and it's known. It doesn't mean you're not expected to be psychic or to have premonitions about what they might have in the future. What are the medical conditions you know from up there that this person has? And then the column B is around what communication issues might impede your support worker force, knowing that this person is experiencing pain or trouble. And that kind of speaks to a lot of the stuff, the bowel obstruction I told you about, Anne Marie Smith. Lots of people there've been a lot of preventable deaths for people not being able to communicate what's wrong. And then column C, what would your staff look for? What would you see if this person was experiencing an acute issue in relation to their medical condition? And then and what's your response? So that's your agreed response. So this is also the sort of thing I might just add, as well as it's being something that the standards require. If somebody passes and it is because of a medical condition, and it was found that it was a known medical condition, and if it went before the coroner's court and you couldn't show them that you had done something, like assessing what you would do if this incident occurred, then you could be held responsible or partially responsible. Because when someone's in care, especially in supported independent living, or when you're doing, more than just a day here and a day there with someone, you really do have responsibilities for that person's care and knowing what can go wrong. Remember, that's proportionate. So if you're just coming and doing cleaning once a week, are you responsible for this? No. We'd like to think you had first aid and could respond, but no one would find you responsible. If you were doing um, uh, community assistance, community, participation or personal care twice a week, maybe, yeah, because if it happened in your under your care, if you were doing, 5, 6 hours of that a week, absolutely. Remember, there isn't always a right and wrong answer. It is proportionality, and you do need to use reasoning to think it through. Um, but I'm sure you get my drift with that anyway. Um, so yeah, up to here, yep, everything except end of life was actually in the standards and required. Here's just a little table that you would just want to help your staff or whoever's doing this if they're not a super experienced. What is a you know high
Oh, your mic again, Gina.
high risk situation? Well, there's a few examples. What is uh, is serious but not life threatening? There's a few examples. We also fill out um, what an ideal person-centered support plan might look like based on the information that you grabbed above there. Um, so essentially, what I can say is that the only thing in our um, assessment, comprehensive assessment here, that isn't in the standards is this end of life. Um, so yeah, this is how you can have safeguarding in place because you've done your due diligence. if you went before, a coroner's court because something happened to somebody, but you had this information and you had that follow-up information from using it, um, you you couldn't be held responsible for it, and you wouldn't even have to live with that. So that's a double win, and you can do your best, but you can't always be responsible. People are going to pass away and get hurt. We can just do our best. The other thing is, which was I saying? That is your safeguarding, and then having an excellent service and getting a lot of good reviews, but also equivalent of that as well is not having lots of incidents, not having lots of complaints. In fact, having the opposite to complaints. That just makes for a much better life for everybody concerned. So that's a bit of a win. So you've got to be curious, you've got to have this information, and you can deliver a better service with the right information. Now, do I have any questions from anyone who's here? And for those who'll be watching at home, you're always welcome to, I'll put this up on YouTube. You're always welcome to post questions in the YouTube comments if you've got any. But does anyone who's here today have any questions or comments or feedback or stories?
We have one from Priya. Can we please get a copy of this form for reference?
Sorry?
From Priya, can we please get a copy of this form for reference?
Look, it's available for purchase, but I can't give it away. Sorry. But I can put the link to it in the email when I send you out a copy of this recording. Any comments or questions or thoughts?
Thanks, Sarah.
Well, I'll thank you all for coming, and um, I'll thank you all who are watching this from home at a later date. And I do hope that you can take something away, which is both about safeguarding and also about having the best business ever. And I'll stay here a couple of minutes in case someone has a question. But I'll switch off the recording, I think. Where are we? Just switch.